What do you do when your family steals your future and calls it love? Zinnia Voss, 28, was about to find out, and her answer will leave you speechless. Stick with her story. You'll see how one woman turned betrayal into strength. In a Portland living room, heavy with the scent of burnt coffee and unspoken rules, Zinnia stood rigid, her hands clenched. Her father's palm cracked across her cheek, the sound sharp, like a branch snapping in a storm. Her mother's eyes didn't flinch. Her brother Caleb, sprawled on the couch, looked away, his jaw tight. Zinnia's crime? She'd said no. No to cooking Caleb's dinners. No to balancing his reckless debts. No to being their invisible ledger keeper. "I'm not your servant anymore," she said, her voice steady, a wire pulled taut. Her father's face twisted, his hand still raised. "You're a woman," he spat. "You fix things." The words stung worse than the slap. They were the hymn of her childhood, sung in every chore, every sacrifice they demanded. But tonight, Zinnia's eyes burned with clarity. 3 days ago, she'd found a bank statement in her father's desk. $15,000, her college fund, siphoned to Caleb's failed startup. Her future? Traded for his ambition. Her mother stepped closer, her voice cold. "Zinnia, stop this nonsense. Caleb needs you." Zinnia's gaze shifted to Caleb. His eyes flickered with guilt, a boy who knew too much. "Tell Caleb," she said, her voice slicing the silence, "he can thank me for funding his failure." Her father froze. Her mother's hand twitched. Caleb's head snapped up, face pale. The room held its breath, as if the walls knew a secret had been spoken. Zinnia turned, her sneakers silent on the hardwood, and walked out. The door clicked shut, final. She didn't look back at the house on Maple Street, its neat lawn hiding 1,000 slights. The night air was cool, sharp with pine and rain. Zinnia walked, her heart pounding with freedom, raw and untested. She carried a backpack, a phone, a truth. She'd been their machine, cooking, paying, fixing. At 10, her mother handed her a grocery list, contribute. At 12, she balanced Caleb's credit cards. At 15, her scholarship money vanished, and they said, "It's for the family." Tonight, Zinnia wasn't their machine. She was a woman who'd seen her life's ledger and refused to let it balance in their favor. She headed toward Lena's apartment, 2 miles away, where a porch light glowed like a promise. Lena, her friend since college, had escaped her own family. She'd understand. The slap stung, but the secret burned brighter. The $15,000 they stole. Zinnia wasn't just leaving a house, she was walking toward a reckoning. If this story hits you because you've carried someone else's weight, been told your worth is in what you give, stick with Zinnia. Hit like if you're angry for her. Share if you've walked away from a place that tried to break you. Subscribe, because this story's not over. Comment, have you ever had to say no to someone who thought they owned you? Zinnia Voss stood in the kitchen, 10 years old, clutching a yellow legal pad. Her mother's handwriting listed eggs, milk, ground beef, parsley. The counter was too high. Her math homework abandoned beside a cutting board. In the living room, Caleb sprawled on the couch, his video game controller clicking, the TV's glow bathing his face. "You're old enough to contribute," her mother said, her voice flat, final. Zinnia didn't know contribution meant erasure. By 12, she cooked dinners, a history textbook propped against the stove. Spaghetti simmered as she memorized dates for a quiz. Caleb, 2 years older, tossed his sauce-crusted plate in the sink and walked away. Zinnia scrubbed it, her hands raw, while her parents nodded at the spotless kitchen. "So responsible," they said, but their eyes never met hers. Responsibility wasn't praise, it was a chain. At 14, they handed her Caleb's credit card statements. $800 in video games and takeout, maxed out. Zinnia worked weekends at a bookstore, shelving novels she couldn't read. Her wages siphoned to cover his debts. "He's under pressure," her mother said, arms folded. "You're good with numbers." Zinnia didn't help. She saved. Again and again. Under her bed, she kept a shoebox filled with scholarship money from essay contests and science fairs. $500 here, $200 there, her ticket to college, to a life beyond Portland's gray rain. At 16, she opened it. Empty. Her mother shrugged. Family needs come first. Zinnia didn't cry. She counted. In a notebook hidden in her backpack, she tracked everything. Grocery runs, $50 a week. Caleb's laundry, 3 loads every Sunday. His credit card payments, $200 a month. Her money. She noted late nights reformatting his resumes while he partied. Bus trips to pay his phone bill. The ledger wasn't just a record. It was her defiance, growing with every line. Her parents called it duty. "You're the responsible one," her father said, his voice heavy with expectation. But responsibility wasn't love. It was a transaction. They praised her when the house ran smoothly, when Caleb's debt stayed quiet. Her straight-A report card? Barely a glance. "Good," her mother said, eyes on her phone. "Help Caleb with his math." Zinnia was their machine, not their daughter. She thought perfection would make them see her, not the girl who cooked, paid, cleaned, but Zinnia, who dreamed of social work, of helping kids like her. She thought they'd return her shoebox, her future. They didn't. They took more. One night at 15, she crept downstairs for water. Caleb's voice, low and smug, drifted from the living room. Her scholarship fund was $15,000, he told a friend on the phone. "Mom and Dad said it's for my startup. She'll get over it." Zinnia froze, barefoot on the cold floor. Her future, sold for Caleb's ambition, a startup that folded in 6 months? He knew. Before she did. She returned to her room, opened her ledger, and wrote, October 12, 2012. They stole $15,000. Caleb knew. Something shifted. Zinnia wasn't just keeping score. She was building a case. Not for them, but for herself. For the day she'd walk away and let their world collapse without her hands. The notebook's pages thickened, each entry a step toward freedom. They thought they owned her time, her money, her dreams. But Zinnia was gathering strength, quiet and relentless, for the storm she'd become. Zinnia Voss sat on the edge of a borrowed mattress in Lena's apartment, the Portland rain drumming softly against the window. Her notebook lay open, its pages creased, ink smudged from years of silent rebellion. Since she was 13, Zinnia had recorded every task, every dollar, every sacrifice. Grocery runs, Caleb's laundry, his credit card payments, each entry a mark of her unseen labor. The ledger was her truth, etched in black ink. 3 days before the family dinner, she'd found the evidence in her father's desk, a drawer he assumed she'd never touch. Bank statements, folded tightly, revealed a transfer. $15,000, her scholarship fund, funneled into an account labeled Caleb's Venture. Her college dreams, built on late-night essays and science fairs, had been siphoned away for her brother's failed startup. Zinnia's hands trembled, not with anger, but with a clarity that cut like glass. She wasn't just neglected, she was robbed. Her future, her work, her ambition, traded for Caleb's fleeting scheme, a business that collapsed in months. She opened her laptop, her pulse quickening, and logged into her father's email with a password he never changed, Zinnia 12. There, in an unsent draft, her father's words glared. "We'll replace it when Caleb succeeds. She owes us this anyway." Owes them? For being born? For existing? Zinnia printed the email, her movements precise. She taped it into her ledger, next to entries like, June 2019, paid Caleb's phone bill, $75. The notebook was no longer just a record. It was a map of betrayal, each line a theft she hadn't named until now. She wasn't their daughter. She was their bank, their maid, their invisible scaffolding. Lena knocked, her voice soft through the door. "You okay, Zinnia?"
Zinnia nodded, her eyes fixed on the notebook. Lena sat beside her, her own history of escape unspoken but heavy in the air. "You don't have to go back," Lena said, her words a quiet anchor. "I'm not," Zinnia replied, her voice firm. She wasn't planning a confrontation, not the kind they'd expect, a loud, tearful scene they could dismiss as drama. Instead, she archived. She scanned the bank statements, the email, every page of her ledger. She saved them to a cloud drive, locked with a password they'd never guess. This wasn't vengeance. It was survival. Then she found something else. A note in Caleb's scrawl, tucked with the statements. "Tell Mom we need another $5,000. Zinnia's fund can cover it." Dated a year after the first theft. Caleb hadn't just known, he'd orchestrated more. Zinnia's breath caught, her fingers tightening on the paper. The golden boy, the one they shielded, wasn't just complicit. He was the thief's architect. She closed the notebook, her resolve hardening like steel. They thought she'd stay quiet, keep paying, keep fixing. But Zinnia was done. She wouldn't scream or beg. She'd build something stronger, a truth they couldn't erase. The rain slowed, the room still. Zinnia sat, her ledger closed, and felt the shift. They'd built their lives on her labor, her silence. Now, she'd let them face the world without her hands to hold it together. The dining room in the Voss family home on Maple Street was a battlefield disguised as a family meal. The lasagna sat in the center, its edges curling inward, untouched, as if it sensed the tension. Zinnia Voss, 28, sat across from her parents and brother, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her father's fork tapped the plate, a metronome of impatience. Caleb slouched, scrolling his phone, his face half lit by the screen. Her mother's eyes darted between them, sharp with expectation. They'd called this dinner to discuss family matters. Zinnia knew it was a tribunal. "Zinnia," her mother began, her voice slicing through the silence. "Caleb's in trouble again. $5,000. You need to help him settle it." Zinnia's gaze shifted to Caleb. His eyes flicked up, then away, avoiding her. She saw the bank statements in her mind. $15,000 of her college fund stolen for his failed startup. And now, another debt, another demand. Her ledger, hidden in Lena's apartment, held every proof of their theft, every line of her erased future. "No," Zinnia said, her voice calm, unyielding. "I'm not your bank. I'm done." Her father's fork stopped. His eyes narrowed, the same glare he'd given her at 10 when she'd spilled juice on the carpet. "What did you say?" he asked, his tone low, dangerous. "I'm not your bank. I'm done." The room went still, the air thick with unspoken rules breaking. Her mother's mouth tightened, her fingers gripping the tablecloth until her knuckles whitened. "You're a woman," she said, each word a deliberate strike. "You fix things. That's your role." Zinnia's chest tightened, but she didn't flinch. Her role. Since she was a child, she'd cooked their meals, balanced their budgets, cleaned up Caleb's messes. She'd paid his credit card bills with her bookstore wages, stayed up late to keep their world from unraveling. And now, they demanded more, as if her life was theirs to spend. Her father stood, his chair scraping the hardwood. "You don't say no to this family," he roared, his face flushed with anger. Before Zinnia could move, his hand flew, slapping her cheek with a force that snapped her head to the side. The sting burned, a hot pulse against her skin, but she held his gaze, her eyes dry, her heart steady. "You'll do what we say," he shouted, "or you're out." Zinnia didn't move. She didn't speak. The silence was her weapon, sharper than their words. Then Caleb's voice broke through, raw and unexpected. "You think this is all my fault?" he yelled, standing, his phone clattering to the floor.
You pushed me into that business. You used her money, not yours." Her mother gasped, her hand flying to her chest. Her father's face went slack, as if the slap had landed on him instead. Zinnia froze, her pulse hammering. Caleb, the golden boy, the one they'd shielded, was turning on them. His words hung in the air, jagged, a truth they hadn't anticipated. "You told me it was fine," Caleb continued, his voice trembling, not with guilt but with defiance. "You said Zinnia owed us, but it was her money." Her mother's voice cut in, shrill, desperate. "Caleb, stop. We did what was best for the family." Zinnia watched them, her family unraveling in front of her. Caleb wasn't defending her. He was saving himself, shedding the weight of their expectations. But it didn't matter. His words cracked open the lie they'd all lived. She stood, her movements deliberate, and reached for the folder she tucked under her plate. Bank statements, emails, Caleb's note demanding more money. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her silence was louder than their shouts, heavier than their betrayal. She walked to the door, her cheeks still burning, the folder clutched tight against her chest. The rain greeted her outside, cold and sharp. The house on Maple Street shrank behind her, its walls no longer hers to hold up. Zinnia stepped into the night, the folder safe in her bag, knowing this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of their collapse, and she held the proof to make it real.
Zinnia Voss walked through Portland's rain-soaked streets, the night air sharp with pine and damp asphalt. Her cheek burned from her father's slap, but she didn't touch it. In her backpack, the folder, bank statements, emails, Caleb's note, felt like a talisman, proof of the betrayal she'd uncovered. 2 miles stretched between her family's house and Lena's apartment, and Zinnia crossed them without looking back. Lena's porch light glowed, a small promise in the dark. Zinnia knocked, her knuckles tentative. The door swung open, and Lena stood there, her eyes tracing Zinnia's face. No questions, no judgment. "Come in," Lena said, stepping aside. Zinnia dropped her bag on the floor, her body heavy with more than the weight of paper. Lena handed her a towel, her movements quick, familiar. She'd escaped her own family at 19, trading a house of fists for a life she built herself. She knew the language of leaving. "You're safe here," Lena said, her voice a quiet anchor. Zinnia nodded, but safety felt like a stranger. For years, she'd been the fixer, cooking dinners, paying Caleb's debts, holding her family's chaos together. Now in Lena's cramped living room, there were no demands, no grocery lists, no late-night bills. The silence was unsettling, a void where her purpose used to be. She slept on a pull-out couch, the springs creaking under a thin blanket. For the first time in years, no alarm woke her for Caleb's laundry or her father's coffee. She slept through the night uninterrupted and woke to the smell of pancakes. Lena's kitchen was small, cluttered with mismatched mugs, but it hummed with life. Lena flipped a pancake, grinning. "You eat first today," she said. Zinnia sat at the table awkward, like she'd forgotten how to be still. The pancakes were warm, the syrup sweet. She ate slowly, waiting for an order that never came. Lena talked about her job at the community center, her voice light, but her eyes checked Zinnia's, reading the weight she carried. That afternoon, Lena brought Zinnia to the center, a low brick building alive with children's laughter and volunteers' chatter. Julian, a quiet man in his 40s, his hands stained with paint from an art class, met Zinnia's gaze. "You look like you keep things together," he said, his voice kind, not pitying. "We could use that here." He offered her a part-time job, helping with after-school programs. Zinnia hesitated, her mind still clutching the folder of proof, but she said yes, her first choice for herself in years. That evening, Lena handed her a flyer for a support group, Estranged Daughters, meeting weekly at the center. Zinnia went, uncertain, and sat in a circle of women whose stories echoed hers. One, with gray hair pulled tight, spoke of paying her brother's rent for decades, only to be called selfish when she stopped. Another, hands trembling, described a mother who stole her savings for a family investment. Their words cracked Zinnia open.
Her pain wasn't singular. It was a thread in a larger tapestry. Then came the twist. Claire, a woman with steady eyes, pressed a notebook into Zinnia's hands after the meeting. "Write your story," she said. "It's not just yours anymore." Inside was Claire's own ledger, names, dates, betrayals, a mirror to Zinnia's. Zinnia held it, her fingers tracing the pages. She wasn't just escaping, she was joining a chorus, voices rising together, refusing to be silenced. Zinnia Voss sat at Lena's kitchen table, the laptop's glow casting shadows across her face. Portland's night was quiet, the rain a faint memory, but her mind churned. Claire's notebook, handed to her at the support group, lay open beside her, its pages a mirror to Zinnia's own ledger of betrayals. She traced Claire's words, then her own, and felt a spark ignite. She wasn't just surviving, she was ready to speak. She opened a blank page online, her fingers hesitant but sure. She typed, "Daughters who were never daughters." No name, no face, just an anonymous blog, a whisper in the digital dark. Zinnia poured out her story. Grocery lists memorized at 10. Caleb's debts paid with her bookstore wages. Late nights keeping her family's world from crumbling. She wrote of the $15,000 stolen from her college fund, her future traded for Caleb's failed startup. She uploaded scans of her ledger, names blurred but truths sharp. The first post was titled, "My college fund was a lie." Zinnia hit publish, her pulse racing. It felt like shouting into a void. But by morning, comments appeared. "This is my story too," one read. "They took my savings from my brother's car," said another. Strangers, mostly women, left fragments of their own pain. Zinnia read each one, her chest tight with recognition. She wasn't alone. She kept writing. After shifts at the community center, teaching kids to read, she'd post stories of cooking while studying, paying bills with babysitting money, being told she owed her family for existing. The blog grew, hundreds of views, then thousands. Sleep became secondary. Her voice, once silenced, was now a current flowing beyond her control. Lena watched her, her eyes cautious. "You're starting something big," she said, handing Zinnia tea. "Be ready for what follows." Zinnia wasn't ready. Not when a post went viral. "My college fund was a lie," struck a chord, shared across forums, emailed to daughters who'd never met her. "You're giving us words," one comment read. Zinnia wrote about the slap, the dinner, Caleb's outburst, never naming them but cutting deep. The truth needed no names. She protected herself too. At the county office, she filed for financial independence, her signature steady. She opened a new bank account, transferred her wages, locked her phone plan. She scanned every document, bank statements, emails, Caleb's note demanding more money, and saved them to a cloud. Untouchable. Then it came, a message late at night from an unknown account. "Is this about the Voss family on Maple Street?" it read. "I recognize the startup story. I worked with your dad. They should be ashamed." Zinnia's breath caught. A stranger had connected the dots. Her blog wasn't just a voice, it was a spotlight, shining on Maple Street. She hadn't meant to expose them, not yet. But the world was watching, and the truth was spreading, fast and relentless. She closed her laptop, her hands cold. Lena slept down the hall, her apartment a sanctuary. But outside, Zinnia's words were moving, unstoppable. She'd wanted to tell her story, not start a fire. Yet the flames were rising, and the Voss family was in their path. Zinnia sat in the quiet, her ledger closed. She hadn't planned this, but she wouldn't stop it. Her voice, once a whisper, was now a chorus, and it was singing for every daughter who'd been erased. Zinnia Voss woke to her phone's insistent buzz, the screen glowing in Lena's quiet apartment. Messages flooded in. Strangers, readers, daughters whose stories echoed hers, drawn to daughters who were never daughters. The blog had become a beacon, its light reaching further than Zinnia had imagined. She stopped reading the comments, their raw pain too close to her own, like brushing against a bruise. Portland's gossip moved faster than her posts. Lena returned from the community center, her face taut. Your mother was at the grocery store, dropped a jar of sauce, just stood there, frozen, while the clerk cleaned it up. Zinnia pictured her mother, her once rigid posture crumbling, her hands empty without Zinnia's labor. She said nothing. Her father's world was fracturing too. A coworker, a stranger to Zinnia, messaged through the blog. He's unraveling at work, they wrote. Snapped at a client. HR has got him on notice. Zinnia saw him in his office, tie askew, his anger, once aimed at her, now spilling over, uncontained.
Caleb fared worse. Lena's cousin spotted him at a diner, his shirt wrinkled, his laptop open to a loan application. Another $7,000 debt, defaulted. The bank called the house, not his cell. Zinnia's mother answered, her voice trembling, begging for an extension. She fumbled with the accounts Zinnia had managed for years. Her competence eroded without her daughter's hands. Zinnia's phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. I didn't know what to do. I'm sorry. Mom. The word sorry sat there, hollow, weightless. Zinnia stared, her thumbs still. Days later, another text from her father. Enough, Zinnia. Come home. Fix this. Fix this. As if she owed them salvation from their own chaos. Zinnia kept working at the community center, teaching children to read, their small hands clutching books she'd once dreamed of studying. Julian, the volunteer, watched her, his eyes kind. You're good at this, he said. Zinnia nodded, but her mind was on the blog, on the messages pouring in, each one a thread in a growing tapestry. Then, the dam broke. A reader from her old neighborhood commented, This is the Voss family, isn't it? Maple Street. I knew they were off. Others joined. Classmates, neighbors. A teacher who'd once praised Zinnia's essays. They bragged about Caleb, never mentioned Zinnia. The spotlight Zinnia had lit burned brighter, exposing her family not by her hand, but by the community she'd awakened. Lena's mother, a retired lawyer, called one evening. I read your blog, she said, her voice steady. You've got evidence, those statements, emails. You could demand restitution. Restitution. The word landed like a stone in still water. Zinnia hadn't seen her fight as legal, not yet. But Lena's mother pressed on. I can draft a letter, she said. No guarantees, but it's a start. Zinnia sat on Lena's couch, her ledger closed in her lap. Its pages were heavy, not with pain, but with power. Her family thought she'd return, fold under their texts, their guilt. But she was building a life, a voice, a truth they couldn't silence. And then the realization settled. They weren't just losing her. They were losing themselves, collapsing under the weight of their own lies. Zinnia Voss stood in her Portland studio apartment, sunlight streaming through a single window warming the creaky floorboards. At 28, she had carved out a life, social work classes, a job at the community center,
a peer support group where she guided others who'd been erased by family. Her ledger, once a catalog of pain, rested on a shelf, a quiet monument to her survival.
She packed a box with deliberate care, her childhood ledger, bank statement showing the stolen $15,000, a printed post from daughters who were never daughters. Her letter, written in steady ink, read, "This is what you took and what I built from it." Tucked inside was a legal notice from Lena's mother, a retired lawyer, demanding restitution for the theft. Zinnia sealed the box and left it on her family's Maple Street porch at dawn. No note, no return address. The Voss family collapsed in her absence. Her mother's texts ceased, her silence louder than her pleas. Her father, once a towering figure, lost his job after another outburst, his temper no longer Zinnia's to absorb. Caleb, drowning in $7,000 of new debt, vanished from the diner where he'd begged for loans. Neighbors whispered through Lena's cousin. The house on Maple Street was hollow, its order gone without Zinnia's hands. Zinnia didn't gloat. She'd won not by shouting, but by walking away, her silence a verdict they couldn't appeal. At the community center, she watched a young girl draw, her smile bright, unburdened. The girl's joy mirrored the childhood Zinnia had lost, a reminder of why she fought. Her blog, now a book deal offer, had given voice to thousands, daughters whose stories echoed hers, their pain no longer silent. One evening, a twist arrived. An editorial agent emailed, "Your blogs reach publishers. They want your story." Zinnia paused, her laptop glowing. Her words, born from pain, were becoming a beacon, not just for her, but for countless others. She wasn't just free, she was a force, her story rippling beyond Portland's rainy streets. Zinnia's journey taught her a truth. Life isn't about revenge, it's about rebuilding. When you choose yourself, you reclaim the pieces others tried to take. Peace isn't loud. It's the quiet of a life you own, built from the ashes of what they broke. Zinnia's ledger, her blog, her new home, they were proof that you can rise, not by burning bridges, but by crossing them and never looking back. She stood by her window, the city alive below. Portland's rain had cleared and the air felt new. Zinnia wasn't the girl who'd cooked, paid, and fixed for a family that didn't see her. She was a woman who turned betrayal into purpose, her story a seed planted for others to grow. If Zinnia's courage moves you, hit that like button to honor her strength. Share this story with someone who needs to know they can walk away. Subscribe for more tales of resilience that lift the soul. Comment below, what did you build after they tried to break you? Let's share